They call this the balloon party, and yes, this is day 2 for me filling in for the great Tim McKernan, who will be back with you on Monday. My name is Dan McLaughlin, and yesterday we had Jeremy Rutherford on. We were talking hockey all hour. I just started throwing him question after question after question. Boom, 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 right hook, left hook. He survived. Will Tim Peel survive this hour? We got Tim Peel, longtime NHL referee who calls St. Louis home now and has been kind enough to join us in studio. And, buddy, it's great to see you.
Good to see you too, Danny. I heard you and JR yesterday. JR is the best. He does a great job for the Athletic, and he's just a good person, but he's got a wealth of knowledge too when it comes to hockey and the Blues.
Did you agree with anything we were talking about or not?
No, nothing.
I figured that would be the case. How you been, man? Everything good?
I'm great. Just it's been 2 years since I retired, and people say, "What are you doing?" I go, "I'm being a dad." You know, Bronson's 11 and Brielle's 9, and so you think about it. Bronson, for the first 9 years of his life, his dad wasn't around much.
Exactly.
You know, Tisha's taking him to hockey.
Your wife.
Taking him to hockey practice and taking him to tournaments and tying up his skates, and it's been nice the last 2 years to be able to coach him and just be a dad and be at home.
I've always wanted to ask you. I've known you forever. We're good friends, but how did you come up with the name Bronson? I love that name.
You know what? It's a funny story. So,
because I'm thinking action films and death.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
who's the actor I'm thinking of?
Charles Bronson.
Thank you.
Yes, and so Tisha, my wife, we kind of battled for a couple months, going back and forth on names. And one day we're at Miley's restaurant. You've eaten there before. And her brother was in town from Illinois, and Bronson's going to be born in like 2 weeks, and we still didn't have a name. Excuse me, and her brother Zach, right out of the blue, he goes, "How about Bronson?" And we looked at each other and we go, "Yep, Bronson."
That's awesome,
I know,
man.
it's a great name. I love it.
I want to go all over the board with you, and if you want to text in and ask Tim Peel a question about refereeing, getting your kids in that, youth hockey, professional hockey, the NHL, whatever the case may be, give us a text, and that is at 399-9646, 399-9646. So I want to start with this. How many years in the NHL for you?
23.
Wow, that's a long time.
Yeah, 1,362 games. It goes by quick. It's funny. It's when you start out, when I got hired back in 98, you're thinking at the time, man, I just hope I can last for 4 or 5 years. You know, maybe I can, you know, you don't think of 23 years. And the next thing you know, you're getting the golden watch and the gold watch and you're retiring. So.
But that's the thing is, you're a young man. You keep yourself in great shape. It's a little different because I would see in Major League Baseball some of these guys that couldn't even move, and I'm like, get him. It's enough, Uncle. It's too much. But in the NHL, it's a different story with you guys.
Yeah, it really is. And I've got a lot of friends that are MLB umpires, and you know Ronnie Culpa from St. Louis here.
Sure.
And I always joke with him that he seems to think that umpiring's tougher physically than refereeing hockey.
No way.
And other than standing there in 100-degree heat, it's
Right.
certainly not. And but yeah, next time you go to a Blues game, and the listeners out there, watch the officials when they first come on the ice. They'll come out before the teams come out. These guys are incredible athletes now. The NHL has done a tremendous job of hiring young ex-players, actually, that can skate, because you have to be able to skate now. I remember the last couple of years of my career, you know, I was 55 when I retired, and I've got Connor McDavid coming down the wing, and I'm skating backwards and he's skating forwards, and I felt like one of those turnstiles at the New York subway, you know. So basically, you know, towards the end of my career, it was more reading the play and making sure that I could stay out of the way.
But the point is, Tim Peel is our guest, longtime NHL ref. The NHL gives you a certain amount of years or till a certain age, correct? And then at that point, they kind of say, all right, enough, and then you become a consultant, or they give you a good retirement plan, that kind of thing.
Yeah, there's really, you know, because of, I guess, HR, they really can't put an age limit on it. Most of our guys try to get to age 50. I was fortunate enough to get to 55. But there's really not a time limit on it. It's really, you know, I was fortunate enough that I worked the playoffs every year that I was in the league, other than the first couple when I first got hired. And it's basically, you know, if the longer you can last, it's probably because you're working playoffs and they can count on you.
Sure. It's interesting too, is is that you're now, what, 57 years old?
57, yep.
So 57. How many years were you in the the minor leagues, or even just getting to start with college hockey, those kind of things, to say, I'm gravitating towards being an NHL ref?
Yeah, I started when I was 13 years old, and I grew up in a small town in Canada, and 1,500 people, and in the summertime, I grew up in a trailer park. We didn't have much money, and the trailer park that I lived in was next door to this country club, and I certainly wasn't a member of the country club. And Mom and Dad, one day, I was bored, of course, in the summertime, and they're like, hey, why don't you go over and see if you can get a job caddy? And so I went over, I got a job caddy, and next thing you know, I was working in the pro shop, cleaning clubs, all that kind of stuff. So then when the fall rolled around, I missed having the spending money, and I was 13 at the time, and Mom and Dad were like, why don't you start reffing the six-year-olds, the 8-year-olds, and that's how I got into it. And next thing you know, it gets into your blood, and I enjoyed it. And once I realized that, I was always a good skater, but I wasn't a very good hockey player. And once I realized that my dream of playing in the NHL was done, I kind of refocused and said, well, maybe I can do it maybe I can get to the NHL as an official.
What part of Canada did you grow up in?
New Brunswick. It's very east coast, beside Prince Edward Island, Nova Scotia. Beautiful country, long winters, short summers, and but it was a great place to grow up. I wish my kids maybe could experience that lifestyle growing up. It was a simple way of life back then, and not to be old, but you and I, we see it now with our kids and cell phones and social media and TikTok, and growing up, I liked the era that I grew up in.
Sure,
it was a simple way of life. We were playing outside all the time. It was
easier to be a kid then.
It was easy. This trailer park we lived in, like I said, was next to the golf course, and in the wintertime, we would take our hockey nets and cut through the woods, and hole number 12 had a par 5, and at the bottom of this, at the fairway, was this pond, and we would play hockey there, Danny, for hours and until it was dark out. And now, if my kids go for a bike ride, I'm looking to, where are they?
Exactly.
And we would
Life
go
360,
over
buddy. I got it on the phone.
I know, and it was a great way of life. I loved it.
You were adopted, correct?
I was. My birth mother was in high school and fooling around with an Italian guy and got pregnant. And back then, 1966, there weren't a lot of single mothers, so she put me up for adoption. And I was in an orphanage for a while, and then I got adopted by this family. And this was in Toronto. We moved to the East Coast shortly after, and then growing up, people said, when did you find out you were adopted? I said, I don't really know, because it really wasn't a big deal back then. My mom and dad, I had an older sister, and being adopted, I was pretty good in sports, so all my buddies that I played soccer and hockey with and so on, they were like, you're not adopted, you look like your dad. It wasn't an issue, where sometimes maybe kids get teased or whatever, or picked on. It wasn't like that at all. And so I had no desire really to even find out who my birth parents were until my mom, unfortunately, she died of cancer at age 50. And
your birth mom?
Yeah, no, my adopted mom.
Your adopted mom.
My adopted mom, and she died of cancer at age 50. And so you kind of think a lot about life back then, and you're not going to have your mother at your wedding, and all these things go through your mind. So I found this lady out of Toronto, and turns out she found my birth mother, and she had 2 boys, and Donnie and Mike, and Don was just down with his family 2 weeks ago from Toronto visiting.
Is that right?
It's we've gone to Disney together as families. It's actually a really feel good story.
That's
now.
amazing,
Yeah, I'm
man.
very lucky. I've got this other family that I never knew that I had.
I got goosebumps listening to this.
Yeah, and my brothers, I'll never forget. I usually tear up, but when I tell this story, and I told it to Don and his wife when they were here a couple weeks ago, my brother Don, I said, I'll never forget the first time I met you in Toronto. I flew to Toronto from Moncton, New Brunswick, and they picked me up at the airport, bring me to this house. They have this big party, and Don and Mike were football players. They were in just out of high school then, and all their buddies came over, and the first night they're like, "This is my brother Tim. This is my brother Tim." Not once did they say, "This is my half brother."
Yeah.
This is my this. You know what? And we just hit it off, and it's been 30 years now, 27 years since I've been a part of their family, so I'm very lucky.
That's amazing. It's an amazing story. I would assume that you have a special place for kids that have been adopted.
100%. I think if my wife and I we talked about it because we had a little difficulty having Bronson, and yeah, it would be something that I would consider if we weren't able to have our own kids. And kids always, I always have a soft spot for kids.
I didn't mean this to turn into Oprah Winfrey on you.
That's okay.
Because I do want to ask you like the best hits you've seen and the fastest skaters and things like that. But Tim Peel is our guest. He's been kind enough to come in. Longtime NHL referee, longtime buddy of mine, and can't thank him enough for doing this. If you'd like to text in a question about hockey, about officiating, about being a referee, please make sure we do this. Let's go 399-9646, 399-9646. I'm Dan McLaughlin filling in for Tim McKernan. This is the Balloon Party on 101 ESPN. Dan McLaughlin filling in for Tim McKernan. This is the Balloon Party. He'll be back with you on Monday. Tim Peel, longtime NHL referee, is in studio. We've got a ton of texts, and one of them is really easy from the 314. Why and how did you wind up staying in St. Louis and making this your permanent home?
That's a great question. And in 2001, I was living in Toronto, tired of the Canadian tax system. And
it's always about taxes.
And I asked the NHL to move me to St. Louis, or to the U.S. And Don Koharski, the longtime referee, was living here in St. Louis, and he's like, Peelsy, you got to try St. Louis. It's an awesome place, great way of life here. People are fantastic. And I moved here, and the first year or so, Danny, I wasn't sure if I really liked it. You know, I was single. I'd go out and people were asking me where I went to high school, and I'm like, I'm 32 years old, you know, and then, you know, it's funny because people, you know, I didn't know a lot of people. And Kelly Chase, obviously everyone knows Chaser, took me under his wing and takes me into Obie Clark. So I don't know anybody. Picture this. I don't know anybody. Chaser starts to introduce me to people. He takes me into Obie Clark's. I meet Jimmy O'Brien.
I'd go in and get a pizza, and you were there longer than some of the polls and pictures that had been up for years.
2004, during the year-long lockout, Big Walt and I spent a lot of time there. And then Chase introduced me to the Tony Sansone. So all of a sudden, between Jimmy O'Brien, Tony Sansone, and Kelly Chase, I went from knowing nobody to everybody. And then a few years later, met my wife, and it's the best. It was honestly the best thing I ever did in my life, besides getting married and having kids, was moving to St. Louis. I love it here, and it's just a great community, great sports town, which I love, and it was the best decision I made.
636 says there's some leagues, minor leagues, that are banning banning fighting in hockey. Do you see that ever happening in the NHL?
You know what? I saw that today. The Quebec Major Junior League are banning fighting for this upcoming season. I'm really torn with that question, and I commented on social media a few times last year. I'm surprised that nobody has seriously been injured. And I don't really want to go down that.
At the NHL level, or just at any level with fighting?
At the NHL level, I mean somebody possibly, you know, passing away from getting in a hockey fight. And what I mean is falling with, you know, they lose their helmet, they fall and hit their head on the ice. It could be tragic.
But here's the other thing, though, just to take it a little bit further. Like, if you watch the Bob Probert documentary, I don't know if you saw that. I did watch it. You could see that it may not have happened on the ice on October 12th on opening night for the Detroit Red Wings, but then fast forward 15 years, and it did. You know, he had the residual effect of concussions, and a lot of people thought that was from the fighting. Now, it could have come, obviously, from playing hockey and the hits and those kind of things, and maybe a culmination of all of them, but you do wonder about the residual effect of the fighting on these guys. You
do. Like, you know, CTE is obviously a real thing, and but I think I see as many or probably more concussions in the NHL from just hard hits. And, you know, you talk to Chaser and these guys, Tony Twist and these guys, Reed Lowe, that were really tough. I don't know if they had a lot of concussions during a fight. I think most of them are from bad hits in the NHL. But you're right. There is a residual effect. I don't.
It's part of the sport, though.
It is part of the sport, but things evolve and things change. I don't know if they'll ever completely take it out, because I think that, is, you know, my role as an official is to police the game, but the players also need to police themselves.
100%.
And when you get a player out there that's taking liberties on a Sidney Crosby or an Alexander Ovechkin, you need a Ryan Reeves to come in there and say, hey, this is our star player. You got to, you know. So it's a tough one.
Yeah, it is.
I don't think they'll ever ban it.
I don't either.
But
never seen anybody go to the bathroom or go to the refrigerator when a fight's going on. I mean, people.
It's the best. It's the best.
People love it, man. This is from the 636, and I was going to ask you about this, but what is the funniest thing someone chirped at you and made you actually lose your composure on the ice? Because there's some chirping, man, all the time.
Yeah, there's Sean Avery, who was a very colorful person in the NHL. He would just say the most obscene things to players, but a lot of stuff that I can't repeat on the radio. But one night we're in Madison Square Garden, and Tyler Kennedy played for Pittsburgh, and Avery's playing for the New York Rangers. and he keeps calling him Pig Nose. Hey, Pig Nose. Hey, Pig Nose. And I'm like, why? Finally, I go to Avery. I go, why are you calling Tyler Kennedy Pig Nose? And he goes, Peelsy, have you ever looked at his nose? And I looked over and I'm like, oh yeah, okay, that's kind of have a pig nose. And I'm like, but where did that even come into your mindset that you're going to call a guy Pig Nose? So
I would laugh. I mean,
I did. I started laughing.
You're buddies with some of these guys, you know. It's just part of the business. Greatest leader on the ice that you ever reffed a game for. That's from the 314. And thanks for the text. These are fun.
That's a tough question because there were a few, but I would say Steve Yzerman, Joe Sakic.
Chris Pronger was a pretty darn good leader.
Well, I was going to say Al McGinnis.
Yep.
And those are a few that at the top of my head. But I think Steve Yzerman, I had a lot of respect for Steve, even though I kicked him out of a game early in my career. He wouldn't talk to me for years. And then it was funny. Last summer, I went up to Michigan to play golf with Panger, and I was like, here's a kid from New Brunswick, Canada, and our foursome was Kenny Holland, the GM of the Oilers, Steve Yzerman, the GM of Detroit, Panger, and myself. And
it's a great foursome.
Yeah, it was fantastic, and Steve and I laughed about it and joked about it, and that's the great thing about hockey is that you would get into it. There would be many games you would get into it with a player, and then you'd see them after the game, and it was completely forgotten.
Yeah.
That's the great thing about hockey players and the relationships that they had with the officials is they knew that we're, you know, a quick story for our listeners, and most of the people know what happened to me at the end of my career, and there was a player.
And for people that don't get into it too, you can explain it here, and then we'll get into what you're saying.
Yeah, I got was picked up on a microphone saying that I wanted to get a penalty against Nashville, and the verbiage just came out wrong. I didn't want to get a penalty against Nashville. We called 2 penalties against Nashville the entire game. They win the game, but it was caught up, and the perception was that maybe NHL officials go out there with the preconceived notions, and that couldn't be further from the truth. And
by the way, I'm 100% on your side. Okay.
Yeah. No, I know that. And you were from day one. You were from day one, and I'll never forget that.
You even up, and that's how things happen.
Listen, I tell people, I go, if you don't think it happens in baseball, I'll watch a baseball game, and there's the umpire calls 2 balls in a row, and he's painting the line, and the pitcher's like, come on. And the next one may be even more outside, and the umpire calls a strike.
Yep.
Because it's about managing the game. And if anybody doesn't think that the game has to be managed, the players expect it, the general managers, the coaches expect it. And you don't survive for 23 years in the NHL if you don't know when to call a penalty at a certain time, when to lower the temperature of the game. That's what makes a good official is reading the game. So anyway, so that happened, and obviously I got sent home and early retired because I was retiring literally 4 weeks to the day. And so I'm driving home that morning from Nashville, and the NHL called me at 7:30 in the morning. They said, "Where are you?" I said, "I'm at the airport." And they said, "Well, unfortunately, you've worked your last game in the NHL."
Wow.
And I said, "Okay." And Danny, I said the conversation literally was 15 seconds because I knew the decision was made by Gary Bettman and Bill Daly. So there was no groveling by me. Oh, please don't. I said, okay, I got to let you go, and I got to get on a flight. So I get on the flight, and I fly home, and my phone, obviously, it was
blowing up.
It was kind of a big deal. It was on Fox. It was on CNN. I was in People magazine. It just became this big thing. And so I'm driving home, and I get this phone call, and it's from it's an unknown number, and I answer it, and it's David Clarkson. And David Clarkson played for Jersey, Columbus, Toronto, hated referees, literally hated. I thought he hated me. And we got into more, yelling matches on the ice, and so I answered the phone. He goes, "Hey, it's David Clarkson." And literally for a split second, I thought he was going to say, "It looks good on you. I'm glad." And I go, "Hey, David, how are you?" And he goes, "I just want to let you know, I just got off the ice here, and I'm retired now and live in Denver, and I'm playing with some ex-players, and we heard about what happened when we got off the ice." And he goes, "I just want to let you know something." He goes, "When I would see your name on the board in the dressing room before the game," he goes, "I knew I had one of the best refs, but I knew I had one of the fairest refs." And he said, "I just want to let you know that because I know we didn't have the best relationship." And that meant so much to me from a guy that I didn't even think liked me, or liked officials. So you never, that's all you, Bill McCurry, a longtime referee, told me once, he goes, you never want to be liked by everybody, because you're not going to be liked by everybody, but you want to be respected by everybody. And that's what I tried to do on the ice. So
you're one of the best, buddy. I know that for sure. Which leads me to this, and it's an interesting question from the 314. Is there something in place for referees for mental wellness? And if you think about it, if you're a ref or an umpire or whatever your sport that you're trying to moderate, let's say, you're getting destroyed by the fans. Good call, bad call, it doesn't matter. No one says, boy, that was a great call. Way to go, Tim Peel. I mean, rarely does that happen. You're going to hear, you were awful. 50,000 people are booing you, whatever the case may be. Is there something in place like that for the officials?
There is, and that's a great question from whoever sent that in.
I actually texted myself. But whatever.
Exactly. It's a great question. There is. They've got a program in place for current officials. They have a program in place for retired officials, and I think mental illness and mental wellness is obviously a topic that we need to talk about, and
100%.
Because everybody goes through stuff. Everybody goes through stuff. And I remember, I can talk personally about it, is my kids were born. I'm driving down Highway 40 here, and I was refereeing, and this is 10, 11 years ago, and I'm like, I'm not happy. I got the best job in the world, getting paid great money. I've got a beautiful wife, 2 beautiful kids. What's wrong? And I reached out to the league, and they hooked me up with somebody, and it worked out for me. Subsequently, now fast forward 2 years later, after I retired, I'm still struggling with how my career ended. And everybody expects Tim Peel to walk into O.B. Clark's or walk into the golf course and be that, hey Peelsy, how everything's great. Well, guess what? Everything's not always great.
Yeah. And
I reached out to the league about 2 or 3 months ago, because somehow I need to get my friends in that. They don't care that how my career ended. We had a party at my house shortly after my release, and shout out to my buddy Andy Kaiser, and he lives in our cul-de-sac, and all these friends came over, and I could tell everybody was kind of walking around on eggshells. And I said, hey, everything's okay. I'm fine. It's all good. And Andy looked at me, and he goes, Peelsy, he goes, you're not our friend because you're an NHL ref. You could have been a garbage man. He goes, you're our friend because of who you are as a person. So I need to quit worrying about what other people think, because nobody really cares anymore. But I've had a tough time letting go of, my kids didn't get to see me work my final game. I didn't get that final game where you see it, Danny, when a ref retires now, the players are coming up to you, they're hugging you, shaking your hands. I didn't get to experience that. So I've somehow got to get over that, because at the end of the day, and you don't get to write your own story. And so I personally have to be strong and set an example for Bronson and Brielle that, hey, you're going to get kicked in the, a lot in your life, but it's how you come out on the other side.
This is fantastic. Tim Peel is our guest, and this is 101 ESPN.
Grant Francis here with a SportsCenter update driven by Johnny Londoff Chevrolet and Johnny Londoff Autoplex. Last night for the Cardinals, they wrapped up their series in Tampa Bay, taking the series and taking the game 5-2 over the Rays. Matthew Liberatore, a great outing, 8 scoreless innings, allowing just 2 hits, had 7 strikeouts and no walks. Tonight, the Cardinals will be in Kansas City to start a short 2-game set against the Royals. It'll be Adam Wainwright on the mound for the Cardinals. Dylan Coleman, the righty for the Royals, 7:10 first pitch. I'm Grant Francis. This SportsCenter update's been driven by Johnny Londoff. Find new roads and shop 24/7 at londoff.com and londoffautoplex.com. Are you kidding me?
It's a fabulous conversation that we're having both on the ice, off the ice, what life is like for Tim Peel, longtime NHL referee. I do want to get into some of the things that happen, on the ice. And one of the questions we've got from multiple people, and I really wanted to ask this too, is just the rule in the game that you don't like. Something you'd say, man, I'd take that out because I just don't like the rule.
Yeah, it's there's not many. I really like the way where our game is right now, the speed of the game, letting we brought in, we didn't bring in new rules, but after the lockout in 2004, 2005, there was a crackdown on hooking, slashing, allowing the star players to really play. Because if you watch the highlights from 20 years ago, it's amazing that Mario Lemieux and Wayne Gretzky and these guys actually could accumulate so many points as they did because there was so much clutching and grabbing and hooking and holding. It was remarkable that Brett Hull could score, the goals that he did.
No question.
The only rule that I really don't like right now is it used to be that we had discretion if a player, usually a defenseman, flicks the puck out of the off the playing surface across the glass, over the glass, there used to be judgment that we could determine whether it was intentional or not. And now it's black and white. And I would hate to see a team that is in Game 7 of the Stanley Cup Finals, they're in overtime, and this defenseman goes to shoot it down, and it goes over it flips up, because that's usually what happens.
It just
flips up, and it goes over, and he's sitting in the penalty box while his team gets scored upon, and that's the reason that that team loses. Because I think that would be terrible. So it's the only thing. I think our game is in a really good place right now, though, and that would be the only thing that I'd change.
You mentioned Obi Clarkson. A shout out to Jimmy and the gang over there, which is a great hockey place to go after games and really at any time. So send the check in, Jimmy.
Yeah.
But after games, and a lot of times teams don't fly out after the game. It used to be standard. They would, a visiting team comes in, play the game, boom, they fly out. That doesn't necessarily happen all the time anymore. So guys are looking to go get a bite to eat, have a couple of beers, sit around, enjoy themselves, talk about the game. So you roll in, let's say. Did you have times, and certainly a lot of the Blues players would go there. I know Joel loved it. Joel Quenneville, go there, get a pizza, hang out, talk about the game. And you roll in. Would you sit down with those guys and just start talking about the game?
Usually.
Or did you kind of say, well, I'm going to let those guys talk about it, let things simmer down, and I'll get them the next morning?
I was such good friends and still am with Keith Tkachuk and Kelly Chase, and it's changed a lot now where, like Connor McDavid, Austin Matthews, I don't know if I really even had any converstions with those kids.
Is that right?
They don't want.
And they are kids. That's kids. It's a good way to put it. 23
years old. That relationship that I had when I was in the league with a lot of players, it's not like that anymore. These guys, the young players, the game's over, they're talking to their agent, they're talking to their parents, they're talking to their advisor, they're on the phone, and
you just hit the one that's nailed it on you nailed it. They're on their phone.
They're on their phone, and so I know the league didn't like that I was kind of cozy with a few of the Blues players, but I would tell people it's kind of hard not to be. It's St. Louis, summertime, you're going to play charity events, and shout out to you for I can't wait to play in yours in October, and the money you raise is incredible, Danny.
Thank you.
And But it's such a small community, and we see it with Al and McGinnis and Chaser and Big Walt and the guys that retire and stay here. It was hard not to become friends with them.
Absolutely.
And so I'd go to OB's, and a funny OB Clark story is with Walt, and it's during the lockout in 04, 05, and we're sitting around having a few beers, and I'm complaining to Walt because at the end of my career, if I pull up my Marriott Bonvoy app, I stayed over 4,000 nights at a Marriott hotel.
It's amazing.
And I was checking into the Anaheim Marriott, and this young girl that was working at the front desk, she probably worked for Marriott for 2 weeks, and she goes, "Oh, Mr. Peel, congratulations on 4,000 nights at our properties." And I go, "It's pretty sad, isn't it?" She goes, "What do you mean?" I go, "Well, basically, I checked in at age 40 and I checked out at age 50. I said I spent over 10 years of my life in a Marriott property." So I'm complaining to Walt about all the travel and all that. And Big Walt, only like Walt could, he takes a drink out of his beer and he sets it down. He goes, "Well, I guess you should have been a better player." I had no comeback on that. I'm like, "Yep, yeah, you're right."
The story about Big Walt, he was there with Doug Waite one night, and I roll into to get a bite to eat at this hotel facility, hotel bar, or whatever, and I see those two sitting at the bar, and I said to the bartender or the waitress or waiter, whatever it was, I said, "Could you put a couple drinks on my
Sure.
tab? I'd like to buy Walt and Doug Waite, a couple drinks." And so all of a sudden, about a half hour later, I get this huge hand on the back of my neck, and I mean hard. And I'm like, "God, stop!" And it's Walt. He goes, "Do you know how much money I make? I buy the drinks around here." That's Big Walt to a T.
He is. He's so generous. And you asked Bert Godin, the longtime trainer that worked for the Blues. Walt would take care of the trainers, the medical guys, the guys that are picking up the laundry, and that's what he's instilled to Matthew.
100%.
That's what he's instilled to Matthew and Brady, is taking care of the guys that don't make the money that you do. And
when I watch them play, they remind me of him. They've got a little old school nastiness, rusty nail to them.
They do. They're incredible players, and I think we really got to see how good they are this year with Matthew going so far in the Stanley Cup Finals, and playing with a broken sternum, like
crazy.
The guys, they're just studs. The whole family is an incredible family, and I joked with Walt one day. I said, "Okay, let me get this straight. Matthew went to college or went to play junior hockey in Canada, free ride. Brady got a free ride, went to college. Taryn just got a free ride to West Virginia for field hockey." I said, "All that 529 money that you and Sean tell, just send that over to Bronson and Brielle, okay?"
He would if he could.
Oh, yeah. The rich get richer, right? It's unbelievable. All
really
three kids. It's incredible how good they are.
It is. Tim Peel is our guest, longtime referee, and has been open and honest, and this has been great. I'm getting so much reaction on the text line, even from my cell phone, that people love you, man. And that's really the truth. I love you. I just think this is great to be able to do this on the air, and you and I have talked off the air a lot about these things. And before we started, I said, "Is anything, you don't," you said, "I'm an open book," which I loved, which is great to hear. I want to ask you, in life, in professional, or just maybe it bleeds over to your personal or professional life, who's been the person that's really, helped you, guided you along what is a tough career to be an NHL referee?
There were certain guys that I looked up to when I first came in the league, that helped me along the way. When I first came in the league, we had just gone to the 2-referee system, so 4 officials on the ice, and I'm working with Don Koharski, Bill McCreary, Mick Magoo, some famous referees that had big personalities.
It's a tough name, Mick Magoo, for a referee.
Is that unbelievable? It's the funniest thing ever, really.
He's really good, though.
He was a good ref, but the cartoon Mr. Magoo, it's like you can't make that stuff up.
Exactly.
And so there were a lot of guys that I relied on, but when I came in, I think because I felt like I needed to make a name for myself, and I think I came in too cocky, maybe a little arrogant, and I figured it out probably the last 15 years of my career is because there's a fine line between confidence and cockiness.
100%.
And it takes you a while to figure that out in anything, whether you're a referee or a broadcaster or just a person in life. It's good to be confident, but there's a fine line of being cocky. So the last few years, I think it helped me in my career, and I worked bigger bigger playoff games, and I was fortunate enough. I got picked. There were 7 of us that got picked to go work the Olympics in Sochi back in 2014. That was incredible. And so it helped me professionally in my career. But as far as mentors in my life and so on right now, Kelly Chase is one of those people that would do anything for anybody. And then Tony Sansone, business-wise, well, first of all, we're great friends, but just business-wise, learning from him and getting advice from him, those are kind of the guys that I lean on now.
How about the rowdiest place that you would go into, and you may say, and I'm maybe putting words in your mouth, you may say, this is going to be a tough night, but man, it's going to be fun because they're going to be all over me. So let's go.
New York City.
Yeah.
New York City. But
the Garden, man.
The Garden. It's Madison Square Garden. Muhammad Ali fought there.
Exactly.
For a kid, I every time I'd go there, I'd be like, I grew up, Danny, in a town of 1,500 people in a trailer park, and now I'm skating on the ice.
I grew up in South St. Louis, and I was calling the Big East at Madison Square Garden.
Exactly, and you're out there, and I was working a playoff game one night. It was Game 7 between Philadelphia, and the Rangers. Huge rivalry, and an hour and a half before the game, they're chanting "Let's go Rangers," and it still gives me chills because I come out of the tunnel and the lights are off and the strobe lights are going, and you're like, I don't need a Red Bull tonight. Like, I don't need it. I'm pumped. I'm ready to skate through the wall here. And then the refs start chanting, or the fans start chanting, "Ref, you suck." And you're like, yeah, this is awesome. I got the fans. It's like people, I always laugh when I go to a game now and I hear the fans yelling at the refs. And I'm like, dude, if they had only had an idea that when I was on the ice and I'd hear it, I'd be smiling inside.
Yes.
Because it's like, this is awesome. I got the fans mad at me. Probably both teams are like, this is going to be fun tonight.
What's your advice for young kids out there, whether they want to be an NHL official, referee, linesman, umpire in baseball? I don't care what it is. What's your advice? And by the way, give your social media stuff too out so that people can reach you if they, parents out there and you want to give them some advice too.
Yeah, at Tim C. Peel 20 on Twitter, on Facebook and Instagram, but Tim C. Peel 20 on Twitter. I think the most difficult thing is for young officials now is dealing with I call it the white noise, the parents in the game, and I see it at the local rinks here. They have this program in Canada, and I'd like to see them instituted here in the U.S., where if you're 14 and under, they wear a green armband, and it kind of lets the parents know, hey, you're yelling at a 12-year-old kid here. For your 10-year-old hockey son that's playing, at local minor hockey, and you're yelling at a 12-year-old kid that is just out here to make money and try to and also he's not volunteering his time because he is getting paid, but without the refs we don't have any games. So it's just to try to just put that, try to block that as much as you can. And I know it's difficult, but that would be my best advice for a young official.
Tim Peel is our guest, and this is the Balloon Party. We'll wrap it up when we come back, but we still have about 10 minutes to go or so in the show, so stay with us on 101 ESPN. I love podcasts, and Tim Peel, who's our guest today until 11 o'clock here on the Balloon Party. I'm filling in for Tim McKernan. My name is Dan McLaughlin, and Tim will be with you on Monday at 10 a.m. And this has been fun. Last couple of days talking hockey, something I love and was intimately involved with for so many years, even last year doing some Blues stuff. But I love podcasts because I get in my car and I just flip them on, and they're fun to listen to. I can't wait for this one. You've got a podcast. You reached out to Jeremy Roenick or vice versa, and you two are going to come together and do this.
Yeah, JR, one of the most colorful U.S.-born hockey players ever. Phenomenal career. He's in the U.S. Hockey Hall of Fame. He should be in the big one in Toronto.
Just like Big Walt.
Yeah, just like Big Walt, exactly. But yeah, JR, we're gonna launch our own podcast. Our first episode is going to be October 4th. It's going to be called Snipes and Stripes, and JR Roenick and Peel Unplugged. We're excited about it because it's going to be a little different than a lot of the podcasts where they interview somebody and they drop the episode whatever day. Ours is going to be a set schedule. We're going to be on this app called Caffeine TV, so people can actually watch it on their smart TVs at home.
Oh, cool.
And we're going to be on every Wednesday at 4 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Central. And I'm looking forward to it. We're going to have a lot of fun, and we're just going to say it the way it is.
Well, unfortunately, you guys won't be able to get any big name guests. That'll be one of the problems.
No, I'm talking to him the other day. He's like, "Hey, do you want to get Barkley on for the first episode?"
How great would that be?
He knows everybody, right? He knows everybody, and so it should be fun. I'm looking forward to it.
Did he chirp a lot to you?
Not to me, but to some referees. There was a referee, Blaine Angus. He eventually got fired. He wasn't a very good ref, and
just let it rip there, Peelsy.
I hate to say it, but he wasn't. And JR got high stick twice in one game that this referee was working, Blaine Angus, and JR is just bleeding. He's filleted open. He's lost teeth, and the ref missed both the calls. So JR's on the bench, and he literally takes a water bottle and throws it at the ref. Yeah, it was crazy. I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe you just did that.
That's hilarious. Did he get ejected? Did he get kicked out?
He got kicked out of that game. Yeah.
Are you still doing, I didn't know if you were still doing a camp for kids.
We took this summer off, but I've done it for 3 years. We'll probably do it again next year. I think it's important to we're trying to improve officiating in St. Louis, and it's a problem all around the country, and I understand why parents do get frustrated now that I'm coaching and a parent, because unfortunately at the lower levels, the officiating just isn't that strong. And
sure.
So it's just the reality of it, and a lot of kids quit because of the abuse that they take from parents and that. And
I
it's
love
unfortunate.
Your idea of what they're doing in Canada by putting what you said it was a green
armband instead of having orange ones on. I think it's a great idea.
I mean, kid's 12. He's 10 years old trying to do this,
right?
And figure it out, man.
And you see it. You see it at football games, baseball games, hockey games, these parents getting into fights with each other. Like last year, we had a team in from Chicago, and I'm on the bench with Jamal Mayers and Matt Lashoff, and the ref came over and he says, these 3 men from Chicago, parents, they're giving the finger to Crew, Jamal's boy. And we're like, the kid's 10 years old. So
wow.
The game ends, and the coaches go on the ice to shake the hands with the other coaches and high five the other team, and I just leave the bench. And I'm walking by our parents, and Tisha, my wife, knows that look, and she goes, don't do it, don't do it. And I walked right over to them and I said, what is wrong with you guys?
Right.
These kids are 10 years old and you're giving them the finger. Like, people are crazy now. It's unbelievable. And you see it at all sporting events. The parents need to chill out.
So I'll wrap it up with this. And this has been a great hour, and we appreciate your time and being so open about everything in your personal life and what it's like on the ice. As you reflect on it now, it could be personal, could be on the ice professionally. What are you most proud of? It's a long NHL career, man.
Yeah, I think it's really not any I think you just actually summed it up for me. A long career. It really isn't any one particular game. You know, I loved working the outdoor game here at Busch Stadium. You know, living here and going to Cardinal games. I loved working the outdoor game at Wrigley Field. You know, going to baseball games, and then now you're on the ice, and you know, I was fortunate enough. I was selected to work the Olympics and work the bronze medal game in 2014 between Finland and the United States. But I think it's just it's an accumulation of or a culmination of my entire career is just longevity. And I was fortunate enough that I worked the playoffs every year. So we have 34 refs, and you take 20 to the playoffs. The other 14 go home. And not that I was the best ref, but I knew the league knew what they were getting. They're like, we can put Peel into the playoffs every year. So it was that consistency. That's what you want to strive for as a ref. Is you want the league to know they can count on you in a whatever type of game it is.
It's awesome. This has been fun,
Well,
buddy.
I wish it was longer because I got to go home and cut the grass now. Okay,
I got to go cut a buddy's grass. That's our lives right now.
Exactly.
Pretty exciting. This was great, man.
Thanks, Danny. I love you, buddy.
Love
Thanks
you
for
too,
having
buddy.
me in.
You bet. He's the best. Tim Peel. I'm Dan McLaughlin. This has been the Balloon Party, and BK and Ferrario coming up next.